Good afternoon, everyone. Or in my time, it's the afternoon. My name's Matt Dirksen. You've seen me a couple times on the channel, and I'm out here throwing a little curveball at you guys, and we're gonna talk about disc golf. And reason being, disc golf is probably my favorite sport to play at the moment. It's just a great recreational sport that anyone can play really, and anyone can get started. As long as you have two arms and hands and fingers, you can play pretty much. We might cut that out.
Keep going.
We're still rolling?
Yeah.
Alright. And what I'm going to talk about today is more about disc selection, where in order to start knowing how to throw, you need a disc first. And you need the proper disc because you could have really good form, but if you choose the wrong disc, it's not going to do what you want it to do. So that's what this video is for. And these three discs are honestly what I would recommend in a beginning starter pack, where if you want to start getting into disc golf, you don't want to break the bank, these three, in my opinion, are probably the best to start out with, where you have a putter, a mid-range, and a solid driver, not a faster driver, and I'll get into that later. But before I get into these, I want to talk about like the disc, and the most important thing to look at in a disc is these numbers here, these statistics, as you can call them. Where if you read from left to right, it's speed. These numbers represent speed, glide, turn, and fade. Where speed represents how fast the disc travels and how many RPMs you can get on it. And obviously, faster the speed, the farther the disc goes. But you need a stronger arm for a higher number. So since this is a 3-speed putter, this disc should be really easy to throw for most people. And then glide, this is essentially how good the disc can maintain loft and maintain flight throughout the whole duration of when it's in the air. So because this is a one glide, it's not gonna like float very well. It's mainly just gonna sink to the ground. Whereas this rock, for example, this mid-range disc has a higher glide, so it's gonna travel a lot nicer through the air and just essentially travel farther with the glide. Then we have turn, and the best way to explain this is, say you're throwing a right-hand backhand, because I'm right-handed and I throw backhand majority of the time. And essentially when you throw backhand with this, the turn represents how much the disc travels right, and then the fade represents how much the disc travels left. Because the natural flight of a backhand is you throw it, and naturally it turns to the right and then fades to the left. And then there's a throw called the forehand, where it's the opposite, where you throw it and then it turns left and then fades right. And that's essentially how it is. And to go off of that, I want to talk about stability of discs, because there's two terms of overstable and understable. And a good example of overstable is this rock right here, where if you add these two numbers together and it's positive, this is an overstable disc, because 3 plus 0 is 3, so it's overstable, it's over 0. And then this leopard, for example, is a -2, 1. So if you add these two together, that's -1. This is considered an understable disc. And for beginners, which is most of you watching this, I would actually prefer you guys throwing more understable discs. Reason being is they're a lot easier to throw and they're a lot lighter, where overstability tends to be more beefy discs, more overweight, which means they're harder to throw and they're harder to get full flight out of. So if you want the most distance possible for beginning, I would recommend more understable discs. And finally, I want to get into why I picked these three as like a really good beginner's kit of how to start going into disc golf and practicing and stuff like that. Where this pig, it is a putter and approach. This is probably my favorite disc that I still use, where it's a disc that I can truly do any throw with. I can throw backhand, I can throw forehand, hammer, you can throw thumber, scuba, which I might talk about in future videos, but this is pretty much a do-it-all disc, where when in doubt, after your drive, you throw this pig here, which I highly recommend, and for putting as well. This rock right here, this is a mid-range disc, so it's a 4-speed. It's a little faster than the pig, but not by much. But it's a great backhand disc where, and the reason why I love about it is when you throw it, it holds its angle straight away, where it's not super understable and doesn't flip as much. Whatever angle you throw it on, that's the angle it's going to hold the entirety of the flight, which makes it easier to throw. And I wouldn't really recommend drivers for beginners strictly because of how they're more difficult to throw. You need a more powerful arm to throw higher speeds. But I would say the Leopard is probably the perfect starting driver to use at a 6-speed, which is a little pushing it for beginners, but it's still a solid speed that I still use as well. And having a higher glide, that's going to make it easier for beginners to get that more flight or that extra flight and distance in the disc. And it's understable, so that just adds to the increased distance as well. So just in case you want to rip it and it's like close to 300 feet or more, you just whip out this disc and you're able to get the job done. But yeah, that's what I would describe for disc selection and what I recommend what you start out with. And possibly in future videos, I'll do an in-the-bag review of showing my bag and the discs that I use, and you can, bounce ideas off me and get whatever input you would like. And yeah, great talking to you guys.